The stench of fear mixed with exotic perfumes hit Captain Damon Cross like a physical blow as he stepped into the underground auction hall beneath Nexus Prime Station. His military-trained senses cataloged every detail of the illegal marketplace. Harsh blue lighting cast sickly shadows across the makeshift platform, where beings from across the galaxy stood chained together, their hope long since extinguished. Damon had infiltrated worse places during his years as a colonial marine, but the slave markets always made his jaw clench with barely contained rage. He'd come here following intelligence about missing colonists, but what he saw on the auction block made him forget his original mission entirely. The auctioneer's voice crackled through cheap speakers as guards dragged forward their next offering. Prime specimen from the Zephyr system. Female, age 24 standard years. Notice the rare crystalline skin formations and documented telepathic abilities. Damon's breath caught as he watched the woman move across the platform. Her skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, crystalline formations along her arms and temples, catching the harsh lighting like trapped starfire. Long silver hair cascaded down her back, and when she lifted her head to scan the crowd, he saw eyes the color of deep ocean storms. Despite the energy restraints binding her wrists, she moved with fluid grace that spoke of warrior training. Her chin remained high, defiant even in chains, and when her gaze swept over the crowd of potential buyers, Damon saw something that made his chest tighten. Intelligence, strength, and beneath it all, a flicker of hope that hadn't quite died. Bidding starts at 8,000 credits, the auctioneer announced. A hulking Thraxian merchant raised his paddle immediately. 8,000. 12,000, called another voice from the shadows. Damon studied the woman's face as the numbers climbed. Where others saw an exotic slave, he recognized something else entirely. A warrior, temporarily caged. The way she held herself, the calculating sweep of her gaze, the subtle shift of weight that suggested she was measuring distances to exits. She was planning something. 25,000. A corpulent Valdorian wheezed, his multiple throat sacs inflating. With excitement, the woman's lip curled in disgust, revealing slightly pointed teeth. Her eyes fixed on the Valdorian with a stare that promised violence if he dared touch her. 50,000. Damon's voice cut through the warehouse noise like a blade. Heads turned toward him, and the woman's storm-colored eyes found his across. The crowded space. For a moment that stretched into eternity, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Or challenge. Her crystalline formations seemed to pulse with brighter light as their gazes locked. 50,000 from the human. The auctioneer confirmed, his voice climbing with greed. Do I hear 60? The Valdorian's throat sacs deflated with indignation. He opened his mouth to bid higher, but Damon spoke first. 100,000 credits. Silence fell over the warehouse like a death shroud. The woman's eyes widened, confusion flickering across her features for the first time since she'd been dragged onto the platform. Even the guards seemed stunned by the astronomical sum. 100,000 credits, the auctioneer repeated, his voice barely concealing his shock. Going once, going twice. No other bids came. The amount was insane for a single slave. No matter how exotic or talented, sold to the human. Damon pushed through the crowd toward the payment station, credits already transferring from his account. Within minutes, he held the ownership contract in his hands. An official document that reduced a sentient being to property. The paper felt heavier than lead, weighted with the authority of a dozen galactic governments who turned blind eyes to this trade. Guards brought the woman to him, her wrists still bound with energy shackles that hummed with barely contained power. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns of her crystalline formations, like living jewelry embedded in pearl-white skin. Her storm-gray eyes studied him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Your new property," one guard grunted, shoving the activation remote into Damon's palm. The woman's muscles tensed, preparing for whatever humiliation or abuse was to come. Her breathing remained controlled, despite the fear he could sense radiating. From her telepathic abilities, Damon looked down at the contract, then at the remote, then back at her face. Without a word, he activated his plasma lighter. The contract burst into flames. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Shouts of confusion and anger echoed off the metal walls as the burning fragments drifted to the concrete floor. Guards reached for their weapons while buyers scrambled backward, unsure whether they were witnessing madness or some elaborate con. "What the hell?" the guard beside Damon started. Damon's fist connected with the man's jaw, dropping him instantly. The woman's eyes widened as he grabbed the shackle remote from the unconscious guard's belt and pressed the release sequence. Her restraints sparked and fell away with a metallic clatter. "Can you run?" Damon asked. Her response was to spring into motion like a coiled wire released. She vaulted over a stack of shipping crates, her movements flowing like liquid mercury. As energy bolts sizzled past her head, Damon followed, his military training kicking in as he mapped escape routes and threat positions. "This way," he called, leading them toward a maintenance tunnel he'd scouted before entering the warehouse. The woman landed beside him with impossible grace, her bare feet silent on the metal grating. "Why?" she demanded, her voice carrying an accent that made the simple words sound like music. Questions later, surviving now. They plunged into the tunnel system beneath Nexus Prime Station. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on the walls as they navigated the maze of service corridors. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Heavy boots, shouted orders, the whine of charging weapons. "Left here," Damon directed, consulting the mental map he'd memorized. The woman moved beside him with fluid efficiency, her enhanced senses allowing her to track their pursuers better than any human technology. "They're splitting up," she reported. 3 groups. One's trying to cut use off at the next junction. "Can you handle close-quarters combat?" Her answer was a predatory smile that revealed those sharp canines. "Tried to keep up?" They hit the junction at full speed. 3 armed slavers waited in ambush, weapons trained on the tunnel entrance. The woman went low while Damon went high. Their uncoordinated attack catching the guards off balance. She flowed around the first man's weapon like water, her crystalline formations glowing brighter as she struck. Her palm connected with his throat in a move that combined martial arts with something more primal. He dropped without a sound. Damon tackled the second guard, his combat knife finding the gap between armor plates. The third guard managed to get a shot off. The energy bolt grazed the woman's shoulder, spinning her around, but she used the momentum to drive her elbow into his temple. He crumpled like a broken doll. "You're hurt," Damon said, noting the burn on her shoulder. "I'll live. Move." They pressed deeper into the station's bowels, following maintenance shafts and cargo lifts toward the docking bays. The woman's wound left a thin trail of luminescent blood, but she showed no sign of slowing. If anything, the injury seemed to fuel her determination. "Docking Bay 12, Damon announced as they reached a service hatch. "My ship's there." "What ship?" "Trust me." She fixed him with those storm-colored eyes. "I don't trust anyone." Smart policy. "But right now, I'm your best option for staying free." The hatch opened onto organized chaos. Loading mechs moved cargo while dock workers ignored the drama playing out around them. Nexus Prime thrived on turning blind eyes to questionable activities. Damon's ship, a modified military transport he'd christened the Stormbird, sat in its berth like a sleeping predator. Alarms began wailing across the station. Security forces were mobilizing. "Now would be good," the woman muttered. They sprinted across the open docking bay as energy bolts crackled around them. Security teams poured from multiple entrances, but the Stormbird's cargo ramp dropped at Damon's approach, automated systems recognizing his biometrics. They dove inside as the first wave of security reached the berth. "Hold on," Damon called, racing for the bridge. The woman gripped a support beam as the ship's engines roared to life. Through the viewports, she watched Nexus Prime Station fall away beneath them, its lights growing smaller until they merged with the starfield. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. The Stormbird was larger than it appeared from outside, its military origins evident in the reinforced bulkheads and efficient layout. The woman explored the common area while Damon ran post-flight diagnostics, her bare feet silent on the deck plates as she cataloged exits, potential weapons, and hiding places. "Medical bays through that hatch?" Damon called from the bridge. "There's a first aid kit in the wall locker." She found the compact medical facility and examined her shoulder wound in the mirror. The energy burn was painful, but not serious. She'd had far worse. As she cleaned the wound, she caught sight of her reflection and paused. Her crystalline formations were pulsing with a soft inner light, something that only happened when her emotions were heightened. The patterns seemed more intricate than usual, spreading further along her arms and upper neck. She traced one with her finger, feeling the warmth beneath her skin. "You're telepathic." She spun around to find Damon standing in the doorway, his expression curious rather than fearful. Most beings found her abilities unsettling. "Among other things," she said carefully, "I can feel it, like a whisper at the edge of my thoughts." He stepped into the medical bay, moving slowly to avoid triggering her flight response. "I'm not afraid of you." Heat flooded her face as she realized he could sense her emotional state. "You should be. Everyone should be afraid of something. But not you." He gestured to the medical scanner mounted on the wall. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded. The scanner hummed as it mapped her biology, its display painting her vital signs in soft blue light. "Zephyrian," Damon said quietly, reading the results. "I thought your people were extinct." "Nearly. The corporate wars destroyed our whole world, scattered us across the galaxy. Most survivors were taken as slaves or worse." She turned away from him, her hands unconsciously moving to cover the crystalline formations on her arms. "We're valuable for our telepathic abilities, and rare enough to command high prices in slave markets." "Why did you buy me?" she asked suddenly. "Because leaving you there wasn't an option." "That's not an answer." He leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking tired. "I spent 12 years in the Colonial Marines, fought in 5 different conflicts, saw things that made me question whether humanity deserved to spread among the stars. When I mustered out, I told myself I was done with other people's problems. And yet here you are. Here I am." He met her gaze directly. "I've got money, resources, and a ship that can take us anywhere in known space. You've got abilities that make you a target for slavers and collectors. Seems like we could help each other." She wanted to reject his offer, to maintain the independence that had kept her alive through years of running and hiding. But something in his green eyes made her pause, sincerity, and beneath it, a loneliness that matched her own. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing you're not willing to give." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd spent so long among beings who saw her as either property or prey that straightforward decency felt like a trap. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Damon Cross, former Marine captain, current entrepreneur. Kira Veltar." The name felt strange on her lips after months of using false identities. "Kira," he repeated, pronouncing it carefully and respecting the alien syllables. "It's a beautiful name." Heat rose in her cheeks, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. Her crystalline formations pulsed brighter, betraying her emotional response to his simple compliment. For the first time in years, Kira Valtar began to hope that freedom might mean more than just running from her past. Perhaps it could mean running toward something better. 3 days of hyperspace travel had settled into an uneasy routine aboard the Stormbird. Kira spent most of her time in the ship's small hydroponics bay, tending to the vegetables while learning to navigate the complex emotions that Damon's presence stirred within her. The domestic normalcy felt surreal after years of constant running. Her crystalline formations had begun to change, developing new patterns that spread across her skin like living art. Damon had noticed but said nothing, respecting her privacy, even as his curiosity was obvious. She caught him watching her sometimes, his green eyes holding an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Kira," his voice crackled over the intercom, breaking through her thoughts. "Get to the bridge. We've got company." She found him at the sensor station, his face grim as he studied the tactical display. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace behind them, sleek predators built for pursuit and capture. "Bounty hunters," she said, recognizing the configuration. "They've been tracking us since Nexus Prime. Must have placed a tracer on the ship. During our escape." The communication board chimed, and Damon hesitated before opening the channel. A hologram materialized above the console, showing a figure that made Kira's blood freeze. Lord Vex Morden stood in what appeared to be a luxurious office, his Zephyrian features more refined than hers. His crystalline formations were elaborate and ancient, marking his status among their scattered people. Unlike her storm-gray eyes, his were the color of winter ice. "My daughter," he said, his voice carrying across space with cold authority, "you look healthy. You sold me." Kira's words came out as a snarl, her own crystals flaring with angry light. "I preserved you. The alternative would have been far worse." Damon stepped partially in front of her, his body language protective. "This is your father?" "Lord Vex Morden of the First Clan." The hologram introduced himself with a formal bow. "And you must be the human who destroyed valuable property. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" "About 100,000 credits," Damon replied dryly. "I can transfer the funds if that'll make you go away." Vex's laugh held no warmth. "You misunderstand the situation entirely. This was never about money." The tactical display showed the pursuing ships close in distance. Weapons were powering up, and targeting locks began engaging the Stormbird's hull. "Then what?" Kira demanded, her telepathic abilities reaching out to probe her father's mind. What she found there made her stagger backward. "The convergence of paths," Vex said calmly. "The prophecy our people have carried for 1,000 years. When Zephyrian and human consciousness merge in one vessel, the barriers between species will fall. Unity will come to the galaxy." Kira's legs nearly buckled as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. You knew I was carrying a hybrid child when you sold me." "I arranged for you to be carrying a hybrid child," Vex said matter-of-factly. "The human colony where you hid for those months, do you think it was coincidence that brought you there? I guided events to ensure the proper bloodlines would combine." Damon's hand found her shoulder, steadying her as the revelation hit like a physical blow. "You manipulated her entire life. I secured our people's future. The child she carries will unite civilizations, end the conflicts that have raged for centuries. But only if she survives to birth it properly, among those who understand its significance. Which is why she was being sold to collectors instead of killed outright," Damon said, pieces clicking into place. "Precisely. The auction was merely theater. My agents would have retrieved her before any permanent damage occurred. Your interference has complicated matters considerably. The pursuing ships were within weapons range now. Warning lights bathed the bridge in red as targeting locks engaged. Energy lanced past the Stormbird's hull as warning shots bracketed their position. "Come home, daughter," Vex said. "Accept your destiny willingly, and the human will be spared. Continue to run, and I'll have no choice but to treat him as an obstacle to divine will. Kira stared at the hologram of the father who'd orchestrated her life like a master manipulator moving pieces on a board. Everything her escape from their dying home world, the years of running, even finding love in that doomed colony, had been guided to serve his vision of her unborn child's purpose. "The child isn't a tool," she said finally, her hand moving protectively to her abdomen where new life was growing. "It's a person, my person. The child is the future of galactic civilization. The child is mine." More energy bolts flashed past their hull as the hunters lost patience. Damon's hands flew over the navigation console, but even as the ship's engines screamed toward full power, Kira could see the tactical situation was hopeless. The hunters were faster, better armed, and they had numbers. "Kira," Damon said softly, "the choice is yours. I won't make it for you." She looked between the man who'd freed her and the hologram of the father who'd enslaved her to prophecy. Two paths stretched before her: surrender to destiny or fight for the right to choose her own fate. The ship shuddered under weapons fire as grappling beams locked onto the hull. Her father had found her, and this time there might be no escape. But as she felt the flutter of movement within her womb, Kira made her choice. "I choose freedom," she said, looking directly at Vex's hologram. "And I choose him." Then she kissed Damon with desperate passion as the hunter ships closed in, tasting freedom on his lips even as the net tightened around them. The explosion that followed was not what anyone expected. Instead of the Stormbird's destruction, Damon had triggered a modified pulse drive that created a massive electromagnetic burst. The hunter ships tumbled helplessly through space as there is. Electronics fried, while the Stormbird rode the shockwave toward a hidden junk point. "Emergency beacon," Damon announced as they limped through hyperspace on backup systems. "There's a place I know. Off the shipping routes, no official designation." "Another secret?" Kira asked, though her tone held affection rather than suspicion. "They. Last one, I promise." 18 hours later, they dropped out of hyperspace near a world that took Kira's breath away. Verdant continents spread across azure oceans, while 3 small moons danced in the planet's sky. Hidden settlements dotted the surface, their energy signatures carefully masked from casual detection. "New Eden," Damon said as they descended, toward a landing pad concealed in a forested valley. Built by refugees, escaped slaves, and others who needed a place to start over. A figure emerged from the tree line as they landed: Commander Blake Sterling, Damon's former commanding officer. His hair was silver now, his face weathered by years of hard living, but his handshake was firm and his smile genuine. "Damon," he said simply. "Been too long." "Not long enough, considering the circumstances." Damon gestured to Kira. "Blake, meet Kira Veltar. The reason we need sanctuary." Blake studied her with professional interest, taking in her alien features and the obvious signs of pregnancy without judgment. "Mom, welcome to our little corner of freedom." "It's not little," Kira replied, impressed by the scope of the settlement. They toured. Underground facilities housed workshops, living quarters, and hydroponic farms. Everything needed for complete self-sufficiency. "Damon's been planning this for years," Blake explained. "Figured the galaxy needed places where people could disappear and start fresh." Over the following weeks, Kira watched their sanctuary grow as word spread through hidden networks. Escaped slaves, political refugees, and others seeking new lives began arriving in small groups. She found herself becoming an unofficial coordinator, her telepathic abilities and multicultural experience invaluable in settling disputes and organizing this sense community. But it was her relationship with Damon that truly flourished in their new home. Away from the constant threat of pursuit, they had time to explore the connection that had sparked between them in the slave market. What began as mutual respect deepened into something more profound. "Your crystals are changing," Damon observed. One evening as they walked through the settlement's central gardens, bioluminescent plants cast soft light across the paths, creating an atmosphere of ethereal beauty. Kira looked down at her arms, where new formations had spread in intricate patterns. Pregnancy affects our biology in unexpected ways. The patterns, they reflect emotional states, bonding with the father of our children. "But I'm not. Biology doesn't always follow logic," she interrupted gently. "You've claimed us both in every way that matters. My body recognizes that." They stopped beside a fountain where water cascaded over crystalline formations that reminded Kira of home. "The child will be powerful," she continued. "Half Cepharian telepathy, half human determination. But more than that, they'll be loved. That's something my father's prophecies never accounted for." Damon's arms came around her from behind, his hands resting on her swollen belly where their future waited to be born. "What do you want for them?" "Choice," she said without hesitation. "The freedom to decide their own destiny, to love who they choose, to build something beautiful instead of being forced into someone else's grand design." "And for us?" She turned in his arms, her crystalline formations pulsing with warm light as she met his gaze. "Everything. I want everything with you, Damon Cross. The boring domestic moments, the adventures among the stars, the quiet nights and passionate mornings. I want to build a life so full of love that the universe itself takes notice." Their kiss was tender at first, then deeper as months of suppressed desire finally found expression. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The settlement has been wondering when you'd finally claim me properly," Kira said with a mischievous smile. "Blake started a betting pool. Smart money was on tonight. Smart money was on 3 weeks ago. You've been admirably restrained." Damon's laugh was rich and warm. "Pregnancy makes you more beautiful, not more fragile. I just wanted to be sure you were ready. Show me how ready you think I am." Their love-making that night was a celebration of everything they'd found together. Damon worshipped her changing body with reverent hands and hungry mouth, while Kira's telepathic abilities created an intimacy beyond anything either had experienced. She shared her pleasure with him directly, mind to mind, until they moved as one being with shared sensation. When her climax hit, her crystalline formations blazed with brilliant light that illuminated their bedroom like captured starfire. Damon followed her over the edge, his own release intensified by their telepathic connection, until reality dissolved into pure sensation and emotion. Afterward, they lay entwined as the settlement settled into peaceful sleep around them. Kira's head rested on Damon's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, while their child stirred restlessly within her womb. "No regrets?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing the new crystal patterns that decorated her skin. "None," she replied, then lifted her head to meet his eyes. "Only gratitude that a human looked at a slave market and saw a person worth saving." "I saw a warrior worth loving," he corrected. The saving was mutual. As if in response to their words, the child kicked strongly enough to make them both smile. Whatever prophecies or destinies awaited, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, free to choose their own path among the stars, bound by love rather than duty, creating something beautiful from the ashes of old worlds. Outside their window, New Eden's 3 moons painted the landscape in silver light, while the settlement slept peacefully around them. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, Lord Vex Morden still schemed and plotted, but his reach couldn't touch this sanctuary of hope and love. Kira closed her eyes and let herself drift towards sleep, secure in Damon's arms and surrounded by the family they'd chosen. The future stretched before them like an unwritten story, full of infinite possibilities and the promise of love that would endure across the stars. The end.